Hey, Lake Point, Pastor Michael here with a recap of the third week of our Advent series. Advent is a season of waiting, hoping, longing, and preparing for the coming of Jesus Christ. This week, Pastor Lindsay talked about how God has called us to become people of joy. Joy is one of those universally desired things. No one is opting out. No one's saying, I tried that, didn't like it. Our culture is saturated with joy language because joy sells. We put it on signs, in commercials, and in holiday decor. We associate it with chocolate, celebrations, vacations, and moments when everything feels right. Those tiny moments matter because they reveal something deeper. Joy isn't just something we seek, it's something we were made for. Scripture affirms this longing. Proverbs tells us that a cheerful heart is good medicine, while a crushed spirit dries up the bones. Joy brings strength, vitality, and life. It's not an accessory, it's essential to our spiritual and emotional health. And so the question isn't whether joy is good. The real questions are far more honest and pressing. How do we get joy and how do we keep it, especially when life is hard? Lindsay shared how that question becomes even more poignant during Christmas. We're surrounded by joy imagery while many of us feel tired, lonely, overwhelmed, grieving, or disappointed. The season promises joy, but our reality doesn't always deliver it. Pastor Lindsay pointed us to a simple childhood song that holds surprising wisdom. I've got the joy, 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 joy down in my heart. Not surface joy, not circumstantial joy, but deep-rooted joy that remains when life doesn't cooperate. To understand that kind of joy, we have to return to the Christmas story itself. Luke 2 tells us about shepherds watching their flocks at night when an angel suddenly appears and announces good news that will cause great joy for all people. Angels fill the sky, heaven interrupts earth, and it's a breathtaking moment. But Pastor Lindsay invited us to look beyond the shepherds and consider Mary and Joseph. When we picture the Nativity, we often jump straight to serenity and joy, but if we're honest, Mary and Joseph's life experience was likely marked by uncertainty, loneliness, fear, and misunderstanding. Mary was a teenager carrying a divine calling that no one else could fully understand. Joseph discovered his fiancée was pregnant before an angel ever explained what was happening. That space before reassurance, before clarity, must have been incredibly isolating. Loneliness has a way of intensifying during the holidays, and when we feel alone, we often fill that silence with expectations about how life should go or how God should show up and how the season should feel. Mary had every reason to expect that giving birth to the Son of God would involve comfort, honor, dignity. Instead, she traveled roughly 150 kilometers while pregnant, gave birth in a space shared with animals, and laid her newborn in a feeding trough. Joy did not arrive wrapped in ideal circumstances. Pastor Lindsay connected this to our own experiences of disappointment. So often what breaks our hearts isn't just what happens, it's the gap between expectation and reality. When the moment we imagine doesn't match the moment we're living, joy feels out of reach. And for some, that disappointment is relatively small and frustrating, but for others, it's rooted in deep pain, trauma, addiction, broken relationships, or unanswered prayers. Scripture, though, offers a powerful word in the middle of those moments: suddenly. Luke tells us that suddenly a great company of the heavenly host appeared. That word echoes throughout Scripture. The Spirit comes suddenly at Pentecost. Jesus appears suddenly to Saul on the Damascus road. God often works this way, not always slowly, but not always predictably, but often powerfully and unexpectedly. When God's presence breaks in, circumstances and hearts can change in an instant. And that's exactly what happens to the shepherds. These were not honored or respected men. Shepherds kind of lived on the margins socially, religiously, and economically. They were considered kind of unclean, maybe even a little untrustworthy. If you were announcing world-changing news, they would not be on your invite list. And yet God chose them. Heaven showed up in a cold, dark field to people society had written off. The angel's words matter deeply. I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all people. That word all changes everything. God did not wait for people to become worthy. He stepped toward them first. Joy wasn't reserved for the religious elite, the powerful, or the put together. It was announced to outsiders. This joy was not exclusive, it was expansive. And that means if you've ever felt unqualified, inadequate, or unsure whether you belong, the Christmas story says joy is for you. But what exactly is this joy? Pastor Lindsay made an important distinction. Joy is not the same as happiness. Happiness is tied to circumstances. It rises and falls based on what's happening around us. Joy, on the other hand, runs deeper. Scripture speaks of joy in suffering, joy in affliction, joy produced by the Spirit of God. Jesus himself said that his joy could live within us. If joy were merely an emotion, those verses wouldn't make sense. Joy is not a feeling, Joy is a choice. It's a decision to fix our eyes on something greater than what we feel in the moment. That's the heart of biblical joy. It doesn't come from perfect circumstances. It comes from choosing to anchor our hearts in God's presence, trusting His promises, and resting in His faithfulness. Joy is rooted not in what's happening, but in who God is. God is faithful. God is compassionate. God is just and merciful. God is our refuge and strength. God is our hope, our peace, and our joy. And God does not change. When our joy is rooted in Him, it becomes resilient. It doesn't deny pain, but it refuses to let pain have the final word. Jesus Himself modeled this. Hebrew tells us that for the joy set before Him, He endured the cross. There was nothing joyful about the cross itself, but Jesus fixed His eyes on what was beyond it, our freedom, our forgiveness, our restoration. Joy carried Him through that suffering. And that's the invitation for us as well. Often we assume pain is the enemy of joy, but Pastor Lindsay challenged us with a surprising insight. The greatest enemy of joy is not pain, it's distraction. In the noise, pressure, and busyness of life, our focus drifts. We postpone joy for some future one day, or we get stuck in the if-onlys of the past. And in doing so, we miss the joy available to us now. Joy often passes unnoticed unless we slow down long enough to see it. Research shows it takes 14 seconds for a positive experience to register deeply in the brain, but only 3 seconds for a negative one, which means noticing joy is a practice. It's something we train ourselves to do. When we pause, savor, and anchor those moments, we're not ignoring reality, we're recognizing God's presence within it. The Christmas story reminds us that joy is not fragile, it is not circumstantial, and it is not something the world can give or take away. The same God who stepped into a manger is the God who walked toward the cross, and if He is with us there, He is with us here. That's why we can choose joy, not someday, but now. Not because life is easy, not because pain disappears, but because God is present. And that presence changes everything. Well, friends, thanks for listening. Enjoy jumping to discussion questions. I'll see you next time.